In World War II, Italy usually got the short end of the stick when it came to technological superiority, or supplies, or equipment quality, or leadership. God, how did these guys last till 1943? One of the most interesting things I remember seeing was an Italian plan to raid New York City. Now, bear with me, the information on this subject was extremely hard to come by, and many of the military wiki pages and various online articles have no sources to claim, so don't take this plan at face value. By 1940, the Italian Air Force was quite substantial, especially considering what they were going up against in the form of British air forces in the Mediterranean. One of the leading areas of Italian aircraft technology was in the form of seaplanes and floatplanes. Italy had built some very successful models in the form of the CANT Z.511, and a bit less luck on, well, this thing.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
One of the more ambitious models the Italians had designed was the CANT Z.511, being the largest floatplane ever built. For anyone who's confused, a floatplane is basically an aircraft with floats attached to it, as opposed to the more traditionally large seaplane or flying boat, which uses its hull to provide buoyancy when landing. The Z.511 had originally been designed as a transatlantic passenger plane, but the two aircraft were quickly pressed into military transportation services when war broke out. There were many specialized commando operations which planned to use the 511, but one of my favorites would be the proposed scheme to use this craft to ferry Italian manned torpedoes across the Atlantic to make an attack on New York Harbor. Prior to 1943, the Italian Decimo Flotilla MAS commando group had much success raiding British and American ships in the Mediterranean using manned torpedoes and frogman scuba divers. Due to these triumphant attacks, the Italian Air Force had modified the cabin of a 511 with the ability to carry and launch up to 4 manned torpedoes for long-range missions, for the only way to deliver manned torpedoes in the past had been using Italy's dwindling submarine forces. So on to this proposed raid on New York. The plan was to involve a full complement of manned torpedoes and their 2-man crews being loaded onto 1 or 2 Z-511 floatplanes, probably departing from Sardinia or North Africa. The transatlantic journey would then cross the Pacific, landing somewhere around halfway, being refueled by German supply submarines, and then continuing on to New York. Based on the other manned torpedo raids, the aircraft would probably launch the torpedoes and their crew outside the harbor, likely at night or a great distance away. The key to the whole operation would be to surprise the enemy, as manned torpedoes and their crew would have free reign over strategic targets, likely attacking ships and possibly even targets on land once their mission at sea was over. After all that, I can't really see the Italian frogmen doing much after the attack, as they would likely now be trapped in New York with no way home, and based on other manned torpedo raids, the men would likely surrender to U.S. forces, avoiding any sort of holdout considering their weak numbers and supplies. In the end, if everything had gone to plan, I could see the Italian raiders taking a few Liberty ships and fuel dumps to their name, quite unsubstantial in the long run, but if this plan had gone down, it would probably just have been another complicated and expensive Axis sabotage plot with little payback in the end. It definitely would have given the Italians some claim to fame, as it would launch them into the status of being the only Axis nation other than Japan who was able to attack the American mainland. Or, more likely, the whole operation would have gone to crap and it would have been another reason to laugh at Italian strategic incompetence during World War II.
Poschetti!